Good afternoon. The House will vote once again for a new Speaker. Who will be the new Speaker of the House? Will it be Representative Johnson of Louisiana or Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York? Capital Politics Special. The vote on new Speaker starts right now. Alright, welcome to Capital Politics coverage of the day of the fourth round of the House Speakership vote. Today, the House will vote a new Speaker days after the drama yesterday. Actually, there was a lot of drama happening yesterday. During the GOP vote behind closed doors, there are four ballots that have been cast. Representative Tom Emmer, the majority whip, the fourth nomination, but that was 12 p.m. Eastern Time. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Representative Emmer dropped his bid to become the GOP nominee for Speaker. That gives Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana now the opportunity or the chance to win the House Speakership nomination for the Republican, and technically he won. Still, there are no new motions from the Democrats if who will be their new Speaker nominee. Still remain the same. Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the House leader, um, is still the Democratic nominee. Now the House is holding its quorum call. A while ago during the prayer, I think you saw Representative Kevin McCarthy, the former House Speaker, go into the podium. I don't know what he did there. I think he just announced that the prayer. I mean the one who to lead the prayer. All right, we'll be right back. Station to Capital Politics coverage. We'll be right back after this short break. This is the vote, a new speaker. average of the vote, a new speaker. As of the moment, there are now 400, 234 members inside the House chamber. We are expecting the 450 members. I personally are expecting, I'm expecting the 433 House members to be present in this um, House Speaker vote. We'll still wait for them to arrive. Let's watch this quorum call. If I'm not mistaken, the other guy is Representative Mike Lawler, and the other was Representative Lori Chavez Dreamer from Oregon and New York. Alright, as of 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, there are now 398 members. Sorry, 399 now members present in the chamber. We're still waiting for 33 now, 33 members, 32 to get on the hall. It's 12:41 a.m. and there are now 427 House members. Sorry, 12:41 p.m. It's 12:41 a.m. here in Manila. 12:41 p.m. There are now 427 members present for this speaker vote. Alright, we have breaking news. A judge has reinstated all charges, um, including a murder count against a former police officer who shot and killed a driver through a rolled-up car window. A confrontation police initially described as the officer shooting the driver after he lunged at him with a knife outside the car. Common Pleas Court Judge Lillian Ransom ruled after a hearing that the facts of the case should be established at the trial. Former officer Mark Dial was charged with murder, manslaughter, official oppression, and four other counts in August 14 shooting death of 27-year-old Eddie Irizarry during a traffic stop. So I think we have now the roll call vote, 429 members. If we count it, the half of it is 214.5. But since that cannot be tallied, if you round off 214.5, it will be 215. So if that's the case, it's either 214 or 215 are the need to win the majority. Let's now listen into the House.
Are all members recorded? On this roll call, 429 members have recorded their presence. The question now recurs on the election of Speaker. The tellers will please come forward to take their seats once again. Thank you. Oh,
Tellers
I didn't know.
the tellers that have passed 50 still remains same. There's still the one to be to tally the votes.
All right.
Alright, with 415 members or 215 votes, Hakeem Jeffries.
The nominations are now in order.
To win. Let's now listen.
The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Mr. Speaker Pro Temp, Madam Clerk, colleagues, on behalf of the House Republican Conference, I rise today to nominate the gentleman from Louisiana, Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the People's House. We convene this esteemed body today at a time of great crisis across America, a time of unprecedented challenges in this hallowed chamber, and a time when our most precious ally, Israel's very existence, is under attack from forces of evil. Yesterday, our dear colleague, our former conference chair, our chair of Energy and Commerce, Cathy McMorris Rodgers, nominated Mike Johnson in our conference. And she put it best, and I want to quote her today. She said, quote, "Trust has been broken and we have come to a standstill. How do we restore trust between members, leadership, and ultimately between Congress and we, the people?" Cathy went on to say, "There's a sense that it cannot be business as usual." She went on to note, above the Speaker's chair in the House chamber is our nation's motto, "In God we trust." Mrs. McMorris Rodgers went on to say, "The times in which we are living demand boldness, unity, and transformational leadership that begins with trust in God and each other. Trust is when the magic happens." In the story of King David, we are reminded that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, end quote. Today is the day that House Republicans will humbly look in our hearts and elect Mike Johnson as Speaker of the People's House. A man of deep faith, Mike epitomizes what it means to be a servant leader. A deeply respected constitutional lawyer, Mike has dedicated his life to preserving America's great principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mike is a titan on the Judiciary Committee and a dedicated member of the House Armed Services Committee. And as vice chair of our conference, he has united all of our members to speak clearly and boldly on behalf of the American people. A friend to all and an enemy to none, Mike is strong, tough, and fair, and above all, Mike is kind. And at this very moment, this Republican conference knows that we live in perilous times and the American people are hurting. Families are struggling under the pain of inflation caused by reckless far-left spending, unable to afford groceries, heat, or gas. We have an inhumane open border with millions illegally smuggled and trafficked, and tens of thousands of children lost in the chasm of the incompetence and negligence of the Biden administration. Israel is under attack by Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists committing atrocities, with Israelis suffering the bloodiest days in modern memory. Crime is skyrocketing on our streets, while there are vicious calls from the left to defund our great men and women in blue. American energy production has been crushed by Joe Biden's radical, failed, far-left Democrat policies, causing seniors, farmers, and families to pay more at the pump. And Americans fundamentally understand that the federal government has been illegally weaponized against we, the people, shredding the Constitution, targeting conservatives, parents, yes, I'll say it again. The federal government has been illegally weaponized against we, the people, shredding the Constitution, targeting conservatives, parents, and even Joe Biden's top political opponent. The people are looking to this great chamber to save America, and save America we will. And as we embark on the path ahead, I am reminded of Galatians 6:9. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. House Republicans and Speaker Mike Johnson will never give up. Today is the day we get this done. May God bless our next Speaker, Mike Johnson. May God bless the United States of America. And I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker pro tempore. I notice a little bit more of a smile on your face today than we have in the past. Mr. Speaker, I rise today at the direction of the Democratic Caucus to place into nomination for the position of Speaker of the House of Representatives the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries from New York. Mr. Speaker, you may agree with this, but we are back here 22 days into this Republican-manufactured chaos, and House Republicans have brought us to the exact same position that we were back then. All of the infighting, all of the disarray, just to end up where we were 3 weeks ago. These past few weeks, we have been left wondering if Republicans were truly intent on solving our issues, reopening the House of Representatives, and rallying around someone to lead this chamber. Or has this been about something else? Has this been about a focus of House Republicans to find the person who can pass their extreme litmus test to oppose marriage equality, enact a nationwide abortion ban without exceptions, gut Social Security and Medicare, and support overturning a free and fair election? It's a fair question. It's a fair question. No one. Nowhere in that candidate questionnaire is it about growing the middle class, helping our communities, keeping the cost of health care lower, and making life for everyday Americans better. The gentlewoman from New York said it right. This has been about one thing. This has been about who can appease Donald Trump. House Republicans have put their names behind someone who has been called the most important architect of the Electoral College objections. He's spearheaded, that's fair, we know how you feel. Yeah, you've made that clear. He's spearheaded the legal effort, joined by more than 100 of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, in support of a dangerous and baseless lawsuit to overturn the results of the 2020 election. On the eve of January 6th, some of my Republican colleagues even called this a failed strategy. Yet those same individuals plan to stand right next to him today. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, House Democrats believe that when members of this body voted to reject the results of the 2020 election, they forfeited their ability to lead this chamber. On this side of the aisle, we know what leadership looks like. Hakeem Jeffries has never turned his back on the will of the American people. The son of two social workers, he has always stood by the side of working families. The most pressing needs of everyday Americans are his North Star. He believes that everyone in America should have the opportunity to get ahead and achieve their version of the American dream. He believes that access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. He believes that reproductive freedom must be guaranteed, not stripped away. He believes that working families, not the wealthy and the well-connected, should be rewarded. He believes in growing the middle class so that everyone can succeed. He believes that our schools and our communities should be safe and free from gun violence. He believes that investing in public schools, not depriving students of fact-based education by banning books. He believes in taking care of our seniors and our veterans, not slashing their benefits. He believes in living up to the promise that America is a beacon of hope and a land of opportunity. He believes in defending democracy against all enemies and adversaries, foreign and domestic. He believes in standing by our allies, Israel and Ukraine. And he believes in keeping our government running and open. Let me be clear. This is not just a belief system. Leader Jeffries has the track record to back it up. He is certainly a far contrast from who Republicans have nominated, with or without their votes, to nominate today. But if House Republicans choose, they can still join us on a bipartisan path forward. Let's come together to fund our government, support our allies abroad, and deliver for working families. End the chaos, end the dysfunction, end the extremism. Let's open up the People's House. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Adams.
All right, just for take note,
Jeffries.
215 members is
Adderholt.
the need to win the speakership.
Johnson. Aguilar. Jeffries. Alford.
Servant Leader, Honorable Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Allen.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Allred. Jeffries. Amadei.
Mike
Johnson.
Johnson.
Armstrong. Johnson. Arrington. Johnson. Auchincloss. Jeffries. Babin. Johnson. Bacon. Johnson. Baird. Johnson. Balderson. Johnson. Ballant. Jeffries. Banks. Johnson. Barr. Johnson. Berrigan. Jeffries. Bean of Florida. Johnson. Beatty. Jeffries. Bentz. Johnson. Barra. Jeffries. Bergman. Johnson. Beyer. Beyer. Bice. Johnson. Biggs. Johnson. Bilirakis.
Absolutely, Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Bishop of Georgia. Jeffries. Bishop of North Carolina. Johnson. Blumenauer. Jeffries. Blunt Rochester. Jeffries. Boebert. Johnson. Bonamici. Jeffries. Bost. Johnson. Bowman. Jeffries. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Rakeen. Johnson. Brown. Jeffries. Brownlee. Jeffries. Buchanan.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Buck. Johnson. Bouchon. Johnson. Bazinski. Jeffries. Burchett. Johnson. Burgess. Johnson. Burleson. Johnson. Bush. Jeffries. Calvert. Johnson. Kamek. Johnson. Caraveo. Jeffries. Carbajal. Jeffries. Cardenas. Jeffries. Carey. Johnson. Carl. Johnson. Carson. Jeffries. Carter of Georgia. Johnson. Carter of Louisiana. Jeffries. Carter of Texas. Johnson. Cartwright. Jeffries. Kassar. Jeffries. Case. Jeffries. Caston. Jeffries. Castor of Florida. Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez de Reamer. Johnson. Sherfilis McCormick. Jeffries. Chu. Jeffries. Siscomani. Johnson. Clark of Massachusetts. Jeffries. Clark of New York. Jeffries. Cleaver. Jeffries. Klein. Johnson. Cloud. Johnson. Clyburn. Jeffries. Clyde. Johnson. Cohen. Jeffries. Cole. Johnson. Collins. Johnson. Comer. Johnson. Connolly. Jeffries. Correa. Correa. Costa. Jeffries. Courtney. Jeffries. Craig.
Happy wedding anniversary to my wife, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Crane. Johnson. Crawford. Johnson. Crenshaw. Johnson. Crockett. Jeffries. Crow. Jeffries. Cuellar. Jeffries. Curtis. Johnson. Davis of Kansas. Jeffries. Davidson. Johnson. Davis of Illinois. Jeffries. Davis of North Carolina. Jeffries. Dean of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. DeGette. Jeffries. Dela Cruz. Johnson. DeLauro. Jeffries. Del Bene. Jeffries. DeLuzio. Jeffries. DeSaulnier. Jeffries. Desjardins. Johnson. Diaz-Pizito. Johnson. Diaz-Balart. Johnson. Dingell. Jeffries. Doggett. Jeffries. Donalds. Johnson. Duarte. Johnson. Duncan. Johnson. Dunn of Florida. Johnson. Edwards. Johnson. Elsie. Johnson. Emmer. Johnson. Escobar. Jeffries. Eshoo. Jeffries. Espaillat. Jeffries. Estes. Johnson. Evans. Jeffries. Ezell. Johnson. Fallon. Johnson. Finstra. Johnson. Ferguson. Johnson. Finstad. Johnson. Fischbach. Johnson. Fitzgerald. Johnson. Fitzpatrick. Johnson. Fleischman. Johnson. Fletcher. Jeffries. Flood. Johnson. Foster. Jeffries. Fushi. Jeffries. Fox. Johnson. Lois Frankel. Jeffries. Scott Franklin. Johnson. Frost. Jeffries. Fry. Johnson. Fulcher. Johnson. Gates. Johnson. Gallagher. Johnson. Gallego. Gallego. Garamendi. Jeffries. Garbarino. Johnson. Mike Garcia. Johnson. Robert Garcia. Jeffries. Garcia of Illinois. Jeffries. Garcia of Texas. Jeffries. Jimenez. Johnson. Golden of Maine. Jeffries. Goldman of New York. Jeffries. Gomez. Jeffries. Tony Gonzalez. Johnson. Vicente Gonzalez. Vicente Gonzalez. Good of Virginia. Johnson. Gooden of Texas. Johnson. Gosar. Johnson. Gottheimer. Jeffries. Granger. Johnson. Graves of Louisiana. Johnson. Graves of Missouri. Johnson. Green of Tennessee. Johnson. Green of Texas. Jeffries. Green of Georgia. Johnson. Griffith. Johnson. Grijalva. Jeffries. Grothman. Johnson. Guest. Johnson. Guthrie. Johnson. Hageman. Johnson. Harder of California. Jeffries. Harris. Johnson. Harshbarger. Johnson. Hayes. Jeffries. Hearn. Johnson. Higgins of Louisiana. Johnson. Higgins of New York. Jeffries. Hill. Johnson. Himes. Jeffries. Henson. Johnson. Horsford. Jeffries. Houchin. Johnson. Houlihan. Jeffries. Hoyer. Jeffries. Hoyle of Oregon. Jeffries. Hudson. Johnson. Huffman. Jeffries. Huizinga. Johnson. Hunt. Johnson. Issa. Johnson. Ivy. Jeffries. Jackson of Illinois. Jeffries. Jackson of North Carolina. Jeffries. Jackson of Texas. Johnson. Jackson Lee.
The distinguished gentleman, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Jacobs. Jeffries. James. Johnson. Jayapal. Jeffries. 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 Johnson of Georgia.
Standing for reproductive freedom for women, I cast my vote for Hakeem
Jeffries. Johnson of Louisiana. Johnson. Johnson of Ohio. Johnson. Johnson of South Dakota. Johnson. Jordan. Johnson. Joyce of Ohio. Joyce of Ohio. Johnson. Joyce of Pennsylvania. Johnson. Kamlager Dove. Jeffries. Capter. Jeffries. Kane of New Jersey. Johnson. Keating. Jeffries. Kelly of Illinois. Jeffries. Kelly of Mississippi. Johnson. Kelly of Pennsylvania. Johnson. Khanna. Jeffries. Kiggins of Virginia. Johnson. Kildee. Jeffries. Kiley. Johnson. Kilmer. Jeffries. Kim of California. Johnson. Kim of New Jersey. Jeffries. Krishnamurthy. Jeffries. Custer. Jeffries. Kustoff. Johnson. LaHood. Johnson. LaLota. Johnson. LaMalfa. Johnson. Lamborn. Johnson. Landsman. Landsman. Jeffries. Langworthy. Johnson. Larson of Washington. Jeffries. Larson of Connecticut. Jeffries. Latta. Johnson. LaTurner. Johnson. Lawler. Johnson. Lee of California. Jeffries. Lee of Florida. Johnson. Lee of Nevada. Jeffries. Lee of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. Ledger Fernandez. Jeffries. Lesko. Johnson. Letlow. Johnson. Levin. Jeffries. Liu. Jeffries. Lofgren. Jeffries. Loudermilk.
Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Lucas. Johnson. Luetkemeyer. Johnson. Luna. Johnson. Luttrell. Johnson. Lynch. Jeffries. Mace. Johnson. Magaziner. Jeffries. Maliotakis. Johnson. Mann. Johnson. Manning. Jeffries. Massey. Johnson. Mast. Johnson. Matsui. Jeffries. McBath. Jeffries. McCarthy. Johnson. McCall. Johnson. McLean. Johnson. McClellan. Jeffries. McClintock. Johnson. McCullum. Jeffries. McCormick. Johnson. McGarvey. Jeffries. McGovern. Jeffries. McHenry. Johnson. Meeks. Jeffries. Menendez. Jeffries. Ming. Jeffries. Muser. Johnson. Mfume. Jeffries. Miller of Illinois. Johnson. Miller of Ohio. Johnson. Miller of West Virginia. Johnson. Miller Meeks. Johnson. Mills. Johnson. Molinaro. Johnson. Molinar. Johnson. Mooney. Johnson. Moore of Alabama. Johnson. Moore of Utah. Johnson. Moore of Wisconsin. Jeffries. Moran. Johnson. Morelli. Jeffries. Moskowitz. Jeffries. Moulton. Jeffries. Mervan. Jeffries. Mullen. Jeffries. Murphy. Johnson. Nadler. Jeffries. Napolitano. Jeffries. Neal. Jeffries. Neguse. Jeffries. Nels. Johnson. Newhouse. Johnson. Nickel. Jeffries. Norcross. Jeffries. Norman. Johnson. Nunn of Iowa. Johnson. Obernolte. Johnson. Ocasio-Cortez. Jeffries. Ogles. Johnson. Omar. Jeffries. Owens. Johnson. Pallone. Jeffries. Palmer. Johnson. Panetta. Jeffries. Pappas. Jeffries. Pasquarelle. Jeffries. Payne.
Gentleman from New York, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Pelosi.
As one who knows and respects the role of Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Peltola. Jeffries. Pence. Johnson. Perez. Jeffries. Perry. Johnson. Peters. Jeffries. Pedersen. Jeffries. Pfluger. Johnson. Phillips. Jeffries. Pingree. Jeffries. Pocan. Jeffries. Porter. Jeffries. Posey. Johnson. Presley. Jeffries. Quigley. Jeffries. Ramirez.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Raskin. Jeffries. Reschenthaler. Johnson. Rogers of Washington. Johnson. Rogers of Alabama. Johnson. Rogers of Kentucky. Johnson. Rose. Johnson. Rosendale. Johnson. Ross. Jeffries. Rouser. Johnson. Ruiz. Jeffries. Rupersberger. Jeffries. Rutherford.
The very honorable Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Ryan. Jeffries. Salazar. Johnson. Salinas. Jeffries. Sanchez. Jeffries. Santos. Johnson. Sarbanes. Jeffries. Scalise.
Great state of Louisiana, Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Scanlon. Jeffries. Schakowsky. Jeffries. Schiff. Jeffries. Snyder. Jeffries. Skolton, Jeffries. Schreier, Jeffries. Swikert, Johnson. Austin Scott, Johnson. David Scott, Jeffries. Scott of Virginia, Jeffries. Self, Johnson. Sessions, Johnson. Sewell, Jeffries. Sherman, Jeffries. Sherrill, Jeffries. Simpson, Johnson. Slotkin, Jeffries. Smith of Missouri, Johnson. Smith of Nebraska, Johnson. Smith of New Jersey, Johnson. Smith of Washington, Jeffries. Smucker, Johnson. Sorensen, Jeffries. Soto, Jeffries. Spanberger, Jeffries. Sparts, Johnson. Stensbury, Jeffries. Stanton, Jeffries. Stauber, Johnson. Steele, Johnson. Stefanik, Johnson. Style, Johnson. Stubbe, Johnson. Stevens, Jeffries. Strickland,
For the protection of voting rights, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Strong, Johnson. Swalwell, Jeffries. Sykes, Jeffries. Takano, Jeffries. Tenney, Johnson. Tanadar, Jeffries. Thompson of California, Jeffries. Thompson of Mississippi, Jeffries. Thompson of Pennsylvania, Johnson. Tiffany, Johnson. Timmons, Johnson. Titus, Jeffries. Tlaib, Jeffries. Takuda, Jeffries. Tonko, Jeffries. Torres of California, Jeffries. Torres of New York, Jeffries. Trahan, Jeffries. Trone, Jeffries. Turner, Johnson. Underwood, Jeffries. Valadeo, Johnson. Van Drew, Johnson. Van Dyne, Johnson. Van Orden, Van Orden. Vargas, Jeffries. Vasquez. Jeffries. Vesey. Jeffries. Velasquez. Jeffries. Wagner. Johnson. Wahlberg. Johnson. Waltz. Johnson. Wasserman Schultz. Jeffries. Waters.
He supports freedom of choice. Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Watson Coleman.
As the only candidate who represents the integrity of this House,
Watson Coleman.
do I need to say Hakeem Jeffries again because I read?
Jeffries.
The House will come to order. The clerk, the staff, and the tellers deserve to have the attention of the House. The clerk will continue.
Weber of Texas. Johnson. Webster of Florida. Johnson. Winstrup. Johnson. Westerman. Johnson. Wexton. Jeffries. Wild. Jeffries. Williams of Georgia.
Fulton County, Georgia, votes for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Williams of New York. Johnson. Williams of Texas. Johnson. Wilson of Florida. Wilson of Florida. Jeffries. Wilson of South Carolina. Johnson. Whitman. Johnson. Womack.
With the 217th pick in the race for Speaker in the 3rd District of Arkansas, selects Mike Johnson.
Johnson. Yacom. Johnson. Zinke.
The next Speaker of the People's House, Mike
Johnson.
The clerk will now call the names of the members who did not answer the first call of the roll.
Byer. Jeffries.
All right, we Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana has been elected the Speaker of the House.
Correa. Correa. Gallego. Jeffries. Vicente Gonzalez. Vicente Gonzalez. Van Orden. Van Orden.
If there are any members who did not answer the call of the roll, they may come to the well and vote at this time. In their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 429, of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 220 votes. And the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 209 votes. Therefore, the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 118th Congress.
Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana has officially won the House Speaker race, gaining a total number of 220 votes, surpassing the majority need 200.
The chair appoints the following committee to escort the Speaker-elect to the chair. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Mrs. McClain. The gentleman from California, Mr. McCarthy. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman. The gentlewoman from Washington, Mrs. Rogers. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro. The gentlewoman from Florida, Mrs. Comack. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark. The gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar. The gentleman from California, Mr. Liu. The gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Delbene. The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Escobar. The gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Underwood. The gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Kildee. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Jacobs. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett. And the members of the Louisiana delegation, Mr. Graves, Mr. Higgins, Ms. Letlow, Mr. Carter. The committee will retire from the chamber to escort the Speaker-elect to the chair.
This is a Capital Politics special report again. I'm Ethan Vargas from Manila. As you all know now, we have now a new speaker, House Speaker Mike Johnson, or Representative Mike Johnson from Louisiana has won the speakership race after 22 days of House under chaos. Well, as we all know, there are no zero. If we have the votes once again, the votes, as you can see, there are no representatives, voting orders, or present. Meanwhile, 209 representatives have voted for Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York. We'll be right back. Stay tuned to Capital Politics special coverage of the vote a new speaker. Alright, welcome back to Capital Politics Special. And that has been, we will not air the speech of the new House Speaker and the speeches of Representative Hakeem Jeffries, but thank you for joining us on this momentous event of electing a new House Speaker. Again, we have witnessed a historic event in the nation's history, in the history of the United States. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish the new House Speaker, Representative Mike Johnson, all the best during the 118th Congress. I'm Ethan Vargas from Manila, from Capital Politics. Have a good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.